what do you consider regenerative design to be?
For me, regenerative design is something that goes beyond designing products that will sell well. Regenerative design is something that gives back and makes the environment even better than it was prior to the existence of this product. Um, so for me, I guess some of the new bioplastics, they are a step in the direction of regenerative design, but they really need to be fully compostable, not just that they compost into these micro sort of plastic units that still exist in our soil. And regenerative farming as well is really crucial, that farmers move away from monoculture towards things like, the agri-forestry types of farming models have been proven to really improve areas that are suffering from drought. So it really has to make everything better than it was prior to the existence of the product, I guess for me would be the key thing.
Sounds excellent. And how would you generally describe a design sprint?
Okay, design sprints they work best for problems which don't have a clear logical answer. So, I mean, it's not going to work for maybe, for example, a problem related to physics or perhaps mathematics. It has to be, they work best with problems that we might call wicked problems, which are very complex and the obvious next best steps aren't clear. And if you step in one direction, often you're creating something worse over here. And then if you address that, you're creating an imbalance or a problem over there. So design thinking is a way to, I always see it as a bit like an accordion. You need to get the broadest view of the whole problem, how it sits, where it sits within a broader system. You need to hold that in your mind, but you also need to be able to, like an accordion, zoom in and zoom out. So you're zooming in and out in different sections of the problem. So it's about getting that broad brushstrokes of the problem and even the wider situation of where it sits, and then being able to hone in and out in depth in different areas. But the real purpose is to find the leverage points where you're going to get the maximum impact from your action. And ideally at the end of a design sprint, although you might have blue sky ideas, which are wonderful, you're really looking for something that's actionable and tangible now. So you're looking for that next best step within the next probably 6 months to a year, something that a person can action now. But it can also create a pool of ideas for further steps down the road. But for me, a successful design sprint results in something that you're going to ideally get maximum impact from this action that you ultimately decide on.
Wonderful. Thank you. Now I come to the third sprint of questions, and this is all tied to an exercise that we have been performing locally to get a different dimension tied to some basic concepts. So the first one is going to be, how would you define a regenerative community?
Regenerative community. Now that is interesting. I mean, communities are in such a state of flux at the moment, and I think particularly COVID has changed and strengthened our understanding of community. So I see really positive, and I would call them regenerative initiatives starting even here in Ireland. Communities have stepped ahead of the government in filling gaps where there has been a need. Communities have gotten together to reach out to neighbours, to support people who have been maybe under real lockdown during the COVID crisis, and found solutions ahead of the government being even seeing those gaps. So it's a very self-organizing, what I see is a very self-organizing community development at the moment. And I believe even in Ireland, the registration of social enterprises in Ireland in the last 18 months has been something like 500% more than you'd see prior to COVID. So for me, all of those things, it's where the community sees this gap and they step in themselves to address it in creative ways. And I think there's lots of cross networking between these community groups. So say ones which maybe are interested in environmental issues, maybe they've been doing litter picking or beach cleanups, that type of stuff, but they're also extending their reach. So for example, even I would have done some beach cleanups, and whereas now I've just recently been aware that there is a lack of information on our national biodiversity platform with relation to marine species, particularly intertidal. So the communities who say have been doing litter picking are now engaged in photographing and you know, so it's something that has organically happened, and it's just extending the reach of that one community group to something that really will have impact. You know, it's very important. We have a real lack of information with this marine biodiversity. And then, for example, our postmen have been incredible about reaching out to the rural community. You know, they've extended their work, you know, in a very meaningful way to connect with people, check they're okay. So I guess regenerative, again, for me, I think community had kind of disappeared a little bit. People were so busy. They were just kind of focused on their own nuclear family and their work, and people were going in and out of their own gates and not really looking left, right, talking to people across the street. They might have gotten a nod. Whereas now, I think there is much more understanding that a strong community is resilient. And it's only through these really strong community networks that we can survive something like COVID. So I'm very hopeful that these social enterprises that have started in the community network will, I think it will only go from strength to strength, but it needs to be very inclusive. But I see the young kids being really good to the elderly people. They're all saying hello more to each other. But Irish people, I have to say, are very, I think historically we're very community minded, but we had lost it to some degree, but it's all coming back.
I almost think that the next two questions that I have for you have been answered, but I'm going to ask you anyways. So I think you answered the question whether it's doable or not, because it's being done, correct?
So as in community regeneration. I think definitely, yes, huge steps are being made in Ireland with this regard, but everything could be better. You know, so I think there's still lack of awareness about areas that are of concern to me personally. So, for example, littering is still an issue. And as COVID has opened up, as we're moving into better weather, even just, I'm really saddened to see in our beauty spots where people are socially distancing, they are getting out, they're being community minded in the sense that they're socializing and looking out for each other. But we have a real issue with littering. So that needs to be improved. And is it doable? Absolutely. It's education. Waste is another issue here. Although we do separate our waste, there's definitely still a great lack of awareness over what goes into which bin, and people not bothering perhaps to recycle or bothering to bring their glass to the glass centre. They just chuck it into the waste bin. So for me, they're all part of community, because waste is a community issue, very much so. So everything is doable, but I think it really comes to awareness. But it's not just awareness. People really need to understand the future benefits of their actions, and that each individual's actions are key, because every day it's all about choosing to make the right choice every day as you go about your daily life. Just all those little choices, it's choosing to move in the right direction. So I think it really needs that awareness of the power of the individual and the impact they can have on that daily basis.
That smells like empowerment. And I think with that, you've answered my third question, the how part. I don't know if there was anything else you'd like to go ahead and add, but if you ask me, you clearly answered this question.
Yes, I think very much it's making people aware of the power of themselves and their actions. I think people, one of the things that somebody said recently, and it really resonated with me, it was people have kind of forgotten their consumer power and the very simple truth that wherever you spend your money, that business grows and prospers and gets bigger. And if you don't spend your money in that store is less likely to grow and prosper. So really being aware of every time you pull out your wallet or your card, that you are encouraging or discouraging the growth of a particular business. So when people are off on Amazon and doing all of their online shopping, I don't think they have that awareness. And I think that needs to come back.